Welcome back to HDTechLogic. In our last video, we set out to install Python and learn how to do print statements. If you haven't watched that, check it out. Now we'll try to do input statements. Let's get started. Right then, so let's continue off where we started last video, and that was with this file. Now, what we're going to need to do is firstly just get rid of all of this. And let's talk over the input command. Now, what is it? Well, the input command is the command basically that requires the user to enter something as an input. Then Python will do something dependent on that input. For instance, an input could be, what is your first name? Or what is your account username? Something like that. What is your password? Things like that are all inputs. Now, how does it go? Well, there's firstly the variable. Now, the variable is the temporary data store for anything that the user inputs. So say the user inputted their password. For the remainder of that session, their password that they put in would be stored for the remainder of the session under that variable. Now, let's get started. So the variable could be something that you name. It could be fname for first name, or password, or YUT. It doesn't matter what you name it. It could be anything, but it will still work. In this case, I'm going to do fname, so it's not too much for me to type. You're then going to want to do it equals and type input. That should go purple if you've typed it right. Now, just like the print commands, you want to do an opening bracket and then inverted commas. Then you type out the question that you'll ask. Closing inverted commas and closing brackets. And that is your very basic input. Let's save it and see what it does. What's your first name? HDTechLogic. End of process. We can do a bit more than that though. If we go back over here, you can see that it, for instance, had no gap like the language says it should. For instance, as soon as I typed in the name, there was no gap between the question mark and the name. And you don't want the user to have to type the space when they type it. So good practice is just at the end of an input to just do a space. Then you'll add a space to it. Also, you can add multiple inputs. If I copy this and then paste it on a new line, I can do lname for last name and change the code to last name. Now, you'll say, what's your first name? And what's your last name? And the code ends. Now, let's get into the realms of what we said last time, which was print. And we said that print was print something or other. Now, you don't have to put these inverted commas in though for prints. You can instead type in the variable name. So for instance, if I want to type in fname, comma, lname, then it will print out first name and then last name. So, what's the comma for? Well, if I just did it like this, it would get confused and think that the variable is just called fname lname. A plus would mean that it would register them as two different variables, but there'd be no gap. A comma would register them as two different variables, but there'd be a gap between the two. So it should look something like this. And as you can see, we've had a very basic print statement at the end. If this confuses you, just ask in the comments. We'll be happy to reply. But say you then wanted it to say hello, first name, last name. You could do this. Hello, space, closing commas. And it's also good practice to put a plus. You may not need to. Now what it will do is it will say, what's your first name? HDTechLogic. What's your last name? Demo. And it will say, hello, HDTechLogic Demo. Simple as that. And that's inputs. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video.